a lot of stereotypes behind it, and oh, it's dangerous, and I don't know what, And I invited him to take part in it, a good friend actually, and the security guy did not let him in because he had black hair. It makes sense to rethink the concept of language as a fixed system, and he gave me a present to one of my birthdays when I was a teenager, and it was a book about the Austrian Romani dialect.
Welcome to a conversation with Romani linguists. My name is Anastasiia. I'm a promoter of the Romani language.
And I'm Yaron, and I'm a linguist specializing in the study of the Romani language.
In this series of interviews, we talk to linguists working on the Romani language. We are eager to know how they became interested in deeper research into the Romani language, what challenges they faced on their professional path, and what fascinating stories and discoveries they had. And today we are pleased to introduce our guest, Jakob Wiedner. Jakob Wiedner is a researcher in linguistics and plurilingualism at the University of Graz. Jakob, you are very welcome here.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you for agreeing to join us and to share your experience. And we have the first question for you. Could you please tell us a little bit about your childhood, where you grew up, what school you attended, perhaps your favorite subject at school?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small village in southeastern Austria. There where Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria meet. Just the border was just a few kilometers away. Yeah, my favorite subject. I know it was not mathematics, so I think it was. I liked history and geography actually. Yeah, that I liked in school. So I went to school there in this little village, into the primary school, and then we moved with my parents to the next larger town where I made the high school.
Very interesting. What about university?
Yeah, I started to study in linguistics in Graz, here in Austria, in Styria. Then it was general linguistics. And then I somehow got to know that in Vienna there are more opportunities to also get into discourse analysis and more metalinguistic stuff, so to say. So I decided then to go to Vienna to finish my master studies there. I mean, in reality, it was just my ex-girlfriend lived there. So yeah, but I always say it's because of the university. Yeah, and then in the course of my studies, I was asked if I want to participate in the Romani project here at the University of Graz, which started in making the documentation of the Austrian Burgenland Romani dialect, but then extended to many, like basically all Romani dialects which exist and which we try to document. And I think I was asked because I always had an interest into the languages east of Austria. I don't know. In school, I learned metro, or like the subway metro or underground. That's the name. Underground map of London, so I knew which metro station is. But in Austria, you don't learn anything about Hungary or Slovenia. So somehow this always attracted me, or was interesting for me, because it was like it was very close, but at the same time, it was very far away, so to say. And yeah, it took me, of course, some years to find out why and what, how Austrian history has its role in that, why it's like that. And yeah.
So actually, your first experience with the Romani language was at university.
Yes.
Okay, we will speak about that a little bit later. Yeah.
Yeah, although I have to say, I just remember that my father, one day, absolutely not connected to university or so, but actually he gave me a present to one of my birthdays when I was a teenager, and it was a book about the Austrian Romani dialect. So he just thought I found it interesting, but after that I looked through it, but didn't touch my interest back then. And then kind of destiny brought me back to that.
What is your mother tongue?
German.
German. Okay.
Like in two different varieties. My mother is from Germany, my father from Austria. So, and they're quite different, the two varieties actually, but yeah, officially it's one.
Very interesting. And what about now? What do you do now? What is your work?
Yeah, now I'm still at university. I'm in the University of Graz. Like this Romani project in that form does not exist anymore, but I still have an employment here at the University of Graz. And yeah, recently regarding the Romani language, we were interested into meta discourses on Romani, and also the question how new varieties, Romani varieties, or better to say Romani-related varieties, like so-called pro.romani languages, are emerging in modern situations or in nowadays situations, which was our last research about this. Otherwise, I have here a project about language attitudes, language ideologies in Austria and neighboring Slovenia about each other. I mean, it's not hard to guess. I mean, the reason why I chose to look at this is to answer the question I already had as a child. So I take the opportunity to answer this question to myself. Yeah.
Right. How did you get interested in Romani? Perhaps could you tell us about your first research, perhaps your first work, after you get interested in this topic?
Yeah, I was back then we were still working on Romlex, this online Romani dictionary, which got quite big. And so my first job here at the university was to go to Romania to make interviews with a speaker of Ursari Romani to extend our dictionary or to complete this part of the dictionary. So I was sent there with a, 3,000 word list to Bucharest to interview this guy. It was a very interesting experience. We had a very fine location in the center of Bucharest. It was
right now I'm in Bucharest, so
okay.
Yeah, welcome from Bucharest.
We even got a place in the Sala Palatului, if you know it. This is
of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember that there was some security guy who was not so happy with the fact that some foreigner goes there into the heart of Romanian politics, so to say. And he was always asking me, "Are you a spy? Is he a spy?" And I really liked the attitude of the guy I interviewed, Ursar, who was like, "Hey, come down. Is everything okay with him? He's good, It was funny, yeah.
But actually, Romlex, this source is very used even now. I personally use this source. It's a wonderful work. So it's amazing.
Yeah, I used it today too for something. And actually, the Romlex server where all of this is based is just in the next room.
Yeah, very nice work, and good to know people who made that. Okay, I also like to ask you, what challenges did you encounter when working on Romani? Except that guy in Zala Palatului.
He was not a challenge at all. He was very helpful. He was very nice. I don't know. I think I never really had the feeling that it's now challenging or going over border, so to say. So I have a very non-mythicist idea of Roma people somehow. I mean, what was difficult is, but we have to jump some years now further was when I made research about this pro.romani variety, or like way of speaking with Romani words in Norway during my doctoral thesis project. What was very hard there was to somehow get some trust of the community that I can interview them. And what actually really helped me was that I was an outsider, so I was not a Norwegian. So they kind of, after they got to know me, after many phone calls and not interviews, but trying to meet and so on. Like they kind of found out I'm an outsider of all this Norwegian discourse. So I think that helped me a lot to get in contact to the people, because otherwise they are usually don't really want to, show something of their culture or speak to outsiders, which, yeah, I think is due to the history, which is not the nicest part of Norway, let's say it like that. And yeah, so it took me really 1 year until I really could find some people with whom I could really do interviews. And yeah, and I remember that there was a lot of stereotypes behind it, and oh, it's dangerous, and I don't know what, and a very negative picture. And I mean, what happened in the aftermath was always the same experience I had. It was completely nice and normal, and in the way I imagined it, actually, how should it be, so it kind of, but yeah, I remember this is always, even if you don't think of it too much, or you somehow think to yourself, hey, that cannot be real, but it's always like very revealing or kind of shocking if you then see what stereotypes are said before you actually meet the people, so it's really was clear how this wall kind of between majority society and Roma people is kept.
Yeah, very interesting challenge. You mentioned that really when Roma people don't want to share their traditions with strangers. I also, I remember one situation when I was visiting museum of Roma genocide in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and one friend of mine, he is Roma, we are very good friends, but even he said me, look at this picture, this is a woman, she was a German woman, and she interviewed the Roma people, and then she used this information for Nazi some bad reasons. And he said, perhaps it's going to be interesting for you. Actually, what do you mean? Yeah. But yeah, it's one of the really, it's a challenge. Yeah. Thank you. And now I'd like to give a floor to Jaron.
Thanks. It's always wonderful to hear also a bit of the personal stories. We're starting with childhood. You and I, Jakob, have known each other for many years, and we've been working together, and we continue to work together on all sorts of projects. And there's always these things that one doesn't necessarily know. How did you get into it, and how did you get motivated? So it's really interesting to hear. But let's go back to your project on Norwegian Romani. So you were working on language documentation, different Romani dialects. Romlex, and the Romani morphosyntax database that you contributed to, and various resources. And then for your PhD thesis, you decided to go to Norway. How did that come about? And you mentioned before, you mentioned kind of pro.romani in passing. So let's dwell on that a little bit. What is that exactly? How did it emerge? And how did you decide to go to Norway?
Yeah, I mean, in Norway they pay well, so no, I mean, it was a job offer, and it sounded very interesting. They were searching somebody for Romani, and this was written, like the job offer was written by the University of Oslo, and obviously, I mean, they got some money from the Norwegian government because they kind of had to show to the minority language charter, because Norway is member of the European Council of Europe. They had to show that they do something about it. But obviously, like they didn't really have somebody with having the resources or having the insight and knowledge to do so. So they were internationally looking for somebody with a PhD position. Yeah, so it sounded interesting, and I sent my project concept there, and surprisingly they took it. And since I studied, or my education at university, my master studies was discourse analysis, or the specialization of my linguistics was discourse analysis, I decided to write discourse analysis of meta-linguistic discourse about Romani in Norway, with focus on that group which is Roma related, and most probably is related to those Roma people which immigrated to Scandinavia in the 1500s. Yeah.
And you were interested already in ideologies and language and ideology.
Yeah, like not yet the language ideologies that I think in the course of my studies I stumbled over this concept, which I find very interesting, maybe also because of my background in Austria and with all the difficult history we have, you know. So this difficult history doesn't just start in 1938. It was also difficult before, you know. So no, back then I thought about that. I was through my master thesis, I made a critical discourse analysis about how people in Austria, dialect speakers, speak about their own language, because I figured out that it came to my mind that people, when they speak the dialect, what they do every day, like 90% of the time of their life, you know, they call their own language ugly. And if you speak standard German, then they say they speak beautifully, you know. So, but on the other side, like, people stick to their dialect. So I asked myself, how can people stick to something which they find ugly, you know? And so I found it very, very interesting. And through this analysis of meta discourses, it started to be very, very interesting, because of course it gives you insight into ideological constructs, what people have, ideas about themselves, ideas about the world surrounding them, about their own group of speakers of speaking their own language and other languages and so on. So I got into that. So I had the feeling that in Scandinavia this makes sense, because there wouldn't be much sense to write now a grammar or a dictionary, because, as said, it's a pro.romani variety, so it's Romani words used in Norwegian. So and kind of a lot of Romani words in Norwegian, but for special purposes, and not as a default, but in a way to express something more in a community way, or you know, to speak more understandably for the communities, let's say, like this.
So let's dwell on that a little bit. So para-Romani, you say, is the way in Romani linguistics, the concept, the term has been used for this embedding of Romani vocabulary into the majority language, or some kind of dialect of the majority language. So in Norway, para-Romani is basically Romani-based words that people use when they talk Norwegian.
Exactly.
And that exists elsewhere as well. And you worked on this in Norway, and basically you indicated that there were at least two sets of ideologies, if not more. On the one hand, you were invited, or you responded to an advert from the university, which ultimately came from government funding, which you explained in the context of Norway's international obligations under international contracts, to take that using of Romani words in Norwegian as a minority language, treated with equality. And that's why you were brought in to work on that.
It was the first ideology, exactly. Yeah.
The first ideology. And then there's also the speakers. So what was the speakers' ideology, and how did you manage to maneuver these two sides of ideology? How do speakers view their language?
Yeah, this was very, I mean, it was very, very split somehow. I mean, there was on the one side, one part of let's say, the activist scene in Norway, which had a very, like ideologically very loaded, so to say, idea of, yes, this is our language, and if something is not there anymore, let's say, for example, the grammatical system, which got lost in the course of the centuries, as elsewhere in Europe as well, so it must be brought back. So they had this idea of, kind of, we must somehow fulfill the let's say, linguistic nationalism ideology of, we are a people, so we need our language, and this thing, and somehow not intentionally, but somehow the authorities, by seeing this as this form of entity, or seeing it as a form of language, and not as an interplay of languages, or as a form of dynamics, of linguistic dynamics, but like Norwegian you learn in school, there you have the grammatical, I don't know, you learn the grammatical system, and now you make a new system. They saw it in this very kind of traditional linguistic way. I'm not very reflected about this, and there are some parts of the community try to fulfill it, or see the need to fulfill it in order to build on it some identity which is really based on linguistic European nationalism, I would say. And on the other side, there were some people who were kind of, let's say, now cool about it, so they did not have this thing. They knew exactly that, we use these words, they are important for us, they are part of our everyday life and of our world, we use it for this and for that. But if it's now a language with its own grammar, or if you can somehow squeeze it into some predefined slot of what a language should be like, they were not so much interested in it. They had a much more pragmatic, and from my perspective, much nicer attitude towards that, and not this ideology. So like, basically, you had these two things, these two ideological groups, so to say. They had kind of some arguments with each other, and somehow this was, so to say, the divide was also made stronger by the Pentecostal movement, because the Pentecostal movement kind of follows this ideology of, it must be a full language, whatever this should mean. And so it became also not just an ideological conflict of language, of ideas of what language should be, of what the people should be, and so on, but mixed to that also with new religious ideas. So it was there was tension, I would say, in the group, but not in that way, because I remember that from the kind of the authorities, I think they pretty much overestimated the tension between it, and it was, to be honest, quite ridiculous from time to time to watch, how the big fuss they make out of it, instead of simply listening to the people and ask them what they want, which would make more sense, in my opinion.
So who exactly was involved from the side of the authorities? At what level were there expectations from you about the work, and did they somehow interfere within that web of tension? Did you feel that you were caught between different sides, or how was it to work within that?
I must say, like in the beginning, as I said, that there was, in Norway, which is a small country, so they didn't have there a group of researchers, they didn't have there something really established towards Romani, so they didn't really know anything or much about it. So they really were looking for somebody who had pre-experience and can also, from a more theoretical point of view, can tell them, hey guys, this is like this and like that. And so they were looking for me. In the beginning, they just said, what I like in Norway is that if you make a PhD, you're really pretty free. So they don't mingle into your work. So you can just do it. I mean, they accept it. And my proposal was already such a discourse analysis. So my idea was to look about what do authorities say, what do law texts say, what do members of the community say, what do activists say, why do they say it? What do they actually need from each other, and so on. So that was basically my idea, to look at that and then try to put all those utterances, or all those contributions together and compare and see where they are talking to each other and where they are don't really reach each other. And they were fine with it, so they allowed it, so I could just do it. Yeah, I got them some help to get first contacts with people who use this pro.romani language, the so-called Tater, or Romani folk minority, how they partly call themselves. And yeah, I said, so it took quite some time to get some people. So I had time to look through the historical literature, what was written about it. And yeah, this was very stereotypistic. Part of it was really published, one source was published in 1944, so it was pretty full of racist connotations and so on. So I could really see how the discourse was in the past. Like, I mean, anyway, clear, no? And then in the 1990s, I saw like literature about that, people, let's say openly, that they are part of the community, starting to get active, getting activists, trying to do something themselves, but of course not on a university level, and like a lot of things which can also be seen in other places. And then was one incident, because I was in contact with one woman from the Norwegian Language Council. So they have their own language council who do some language related stuff. And they also, Norwegians, they love themselves and their language. So they do a lot of things about it, and it's very important for them. And but also this language council does the minority languages. And then I have the Sami languages in northern Norway, which are very well protected. They get a lot of money. And then you have other minority languages, among them the different Romani and pro.romani varieties, which get very little attention. And there was once one woman which I was in frequent contact with. She worked at the language council, and she always contacted me for, but more as an expert, like really, hey, what do you say to this? What do you say to that? She was really like fair, and she was not mingling into my work at all. And then there was in one conference in Trondheim where she kind of just announced that, the government in the future would like to do something more about Romani and so on. And there was one guy of the community who threatened her, like, don't even think that you will make there any research about it, because otherwise we will do bad things to you or so. And this threat kind of, on the one side, caused a very, very strict, or let's say a strong reaction from the Norwegian authorities. Okay, let's let it. Okay, we don't do anything anymore. And after that, also, I remember that I heard some hearsay from people who had contacts to the authorities or to the government, actually, and they said, the next 5-year plan or so, we will postpone it. We will not do any Romani stuff right now because the situation is so tense. And then I found it ridiculous, because this was one guy who wanted to be cool, and I a little bit. I mean, I cannot say if it's really like this, but I have to say a little bit. It felt like they were searching a reason, maybe, to why not going on with this, or why it's not good. And I had a little bit the feeling that, yes, they got with that, they got their reason. And then they also took it as a pretext to hold my thesis secret for a time, until the tension, got back to normal again or so. And
so
then
how does one do that? How does one hold a thesis confidential.
University.
You're not allowed to distribute it. You're not allowed to publish it, or how did?
No, I can distribute it, but just the university didn't put it on their homepage for 2 years or so. That was it. And I mean, I found it pretty ridiculous. I mean, I distributed, and it can be distributed, and I don't give.
And that was the university did that because the government asked them to do that, or was that their own decision?
Yes. I think, because I mean, Norway is a very small country, so everybody talks to everybody always. So I mean, they decided in a semi-transparent way, let's say it like this. But the nicest anecdote of this was that there was my defense of the big. Official defense of my thesis, and it was.
I was invited to because I was sort of involved a little bit in the process, but unfortunately, I think there was a clash, so I wasn't able to attend. I'm curious.
It was really nice because I mean it was in the big hallway of very fine. In Norway they dress nicely and everything, so they made it there, and they really put there one security guy on the front door, just if the Tatar are coming to, that they can somehow react, so that they don't, I don't know, run into it and with Kalashnikovs and shoot everybody or so. And was really funny. And I invited a friend, which is from the Tatar community, and I invited him to take part in it. A good friend actually. And the security guy did not let him in because he had black hair, and. And then my boss, she slowly figured out that it was pretty stupid. It was not just stupid; it was really, really, really bad, And I remember then at the afterwards party, of course, I invited this friend, and she was crying. I'm sorry. She was embarrassed, like you can just imagine, And I really liked the joke of this one friend of mine. He said, "At least the security did a good job,
So that's quite interesting. What upon reflection, with jokes aside, and it's nice to be able to look back at it, of course, with a bit of humor. But it just shows how much imagination, if not outright prejudice, shapes attitudes and shapes actions, even when in the center of the whole enterprise is something very benevolent, is actually the aspiration to do good and to know more and to build bridges. And then it all gets so entangled. But within all of that, I wanted to ask you, did you set out, given the situation there and given how the project emerged, did you have the ambition to have any impact either on policy on the one hand or on what users of the language might either feel about themselves or communicate to others or continue to promote their language? And if you did, what were those aspirations, and did they materialize in any way?
Yes. Two things. Thing one, as you said, I start with the bad one, then the good one. I liked it. Thing one was my ambition to change a little bit the way how politics or how the authorities see or look at this variety, and also at the speakers, and especially if you read the conclusion of my thesis, I think that it becomes pretty clear where kind of almost explicitly, although I'm, as an Austrian, I hate to be explicit, but but I try to explicitly say that yes, it makes sense to rethink the concept of language as a fixed system, and rather see language as a form of dynamics, which is at home in different parts or in different grammars. So get away from this idea, a good language has its own grammar, it has its own vocabulary and so on, and then we are very puristic and, like in France, where they try to translate every word for computer parts or so.
And that comes back to the point you were making before about dialect speakers who feel bad about their own dialects, but yet they continue to use it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this was the one thing. And I would say that this did not materialize, I think, simply out of the fact that they were not really interested in doing so, or in implementing this into future policies. At least what I know, like when everything, like no change whatsoever was made or so, because also the law text should be still the same from 2001. I'm not aware about if they made any adjustments to it from the side, because my idea was,
Sorry, what text is that? Which law is that?
I have to look. This is the law. This is a law text, and it's basically for the Norwegian Parliament. It's an explanation text, which is a comment on the minority law of the 90s, and it was. And there is, it was the last version, I think, is from 2001, where there is written in short for Parliament members. What Romani actually is, and they have and there they have exactly like this essentialist idea of the language as a closed system. And that was my aim, to say, hey, rethink that, like do other stuff. And then I kind of saw also my thesis as a way to highlight other possibilities of interpretation, other possibilities of looking at the thing, and thus having the ability to better see what they are doing, and thus being more able to implement fundings, projects, discussion rounds, congresses, I don't know what, which would be more in favor of the community itself, rather than some fixed idea of language. So of course my idea was like, I tell them that no, it doesn't make any sense if you give that one who screams the loudest, I don't know, 300,000 euros, and then wondering why he's not able to make a linguistic project or so. No, but rather go really from bottom up, visit a lot of families, get really starting to be supportive in a meta-linguistic discourse, which after a lot of time, and it needs time because standard languages cannot be built from one day to another, to take it serious and give really a serious support for the community to find the solution they would be most fine with, but in my opinion, it didn't happen at all. And as I said before, they had a good pretext to do so. So this was the one thing. Towards the community, and my idea was to make an online dictionary, so kind of Romlex Lite for Norwegian Romani. I saw all material of Romani which I could find. I put there, so you can, I think, if you put Norwegian Romani dictionary or Norsk Romani Urbook in Norwegian, I think it's the first on Google. You can look at it. It's from the University of Oslo, and I have to say that still, although I don't manage this since 10 years almost, not anymore, but I really like, because if somebody is interested or registers there, I get an email copy, so I can always see it still all the time, minimum once a month. I get there is a new registration. So as I see the people are interested, and the idea was especially like those people who didn't have the chance to learn language because they were maybe taken away as children, which is part of this dark history of Norway. So to relearn it, or like to compare, or like, here it is, do whatever you want with it. So it has what many people ask me. It always has, like, it's written there, what is the source of the word? Is it from Indic? Is it an old Indic source, or is it from another language? Because they were very much interested into, is it really from India, and so on. So I thought it would be nice and interesting for the people. And this is well used, yeah. So this, I would say, the second part towards the community, it was very successful. The first part, so my more socio-political aim, not it's not so
Well,
much.
it's very interesting to see and measure the success of a digital resource that's sustainable and free to use and easy to use, and seems particularly fitting for the kind of language variety that you described Norwegian as a para-Romani, so it's mainly vocabulary. And many people have this notion of language as being primarily vocabulary. As linguists, we're interested sometimes even more in the structural aspects of the grammar and the sound system and so on. But everyday populations, everyday users of language usually think of language as words. But basically, that's kind of a model in a way of engaging communities worldwide through digital resources. Romlex continues to be used very, very widely by people of all sorts of backgrounds who are just curious about the language. And as you know, we developed a resource in Manchester for Anglo-Romani, which is also a para-Romani, a similar kind of way of using Romani words embedded into English, and that was also online. And that came actually from demand of the community, or request from the community. I left the University of Manchester after 25 years, and then the university administration erased all of those resources, and we're struggling now to put them back together again. It's really, really lovely to hear that you have the relationship that Oslo University has with you allows you, after 10 years, to continue to be involved and monitor that. So that's really a fascinating insight with also an interesting evaluation of what are the prospects of linguists to engage in societal change, which you said from the very beginning was very important to you, because one of the things that motivated you to get into this was, what is so close and yet appeared so distant. And I think, what you started off when you mentioned the physical distance or closeness of the countries in the border area where you grew up, metaphorically applies to Romani people everywhere. For the majority society, they're so close and yet so distant. So thank you for that. Well, we're going to gradually bring this to a close for time limitations, if nothing else. But I'd like to hand over back to Anastasiia for a couple of concluding questions.
Yeah, thank you. Now our concluding questions is, what do you consider to be your major discovery? So actually you mentioned a lot of things, but what do you think for you personally is going to be the major?
That always the same, that if you give people enough time to reflect, then it's always amazing how much the people know, and carrying this knowledge with themselves. But of course, in everyday life, you kind of forget it, and you don't think about it. And what is needed is time. And this is one thing I think is also about Romani, and a lot of discussions, not just in Norway, but I would say everywhere, is time. Because on the one side, universities, they do everything, they think for whatever reason, everything has to be done in 3 years, which is almost never the case. And on the other side, also governments, or like people who do funding or institutions, they need a fixed time frame. They kind of want to have fast. But I think what is missing is that there should be really a serious contribution, which is not dependent on how it must be done in a short period, but it would be time to really give. Also, the Romani communities themselves should give themselves enough time, because if I think when in German they started to speak about that we need some standard language, Martin Luther, 1500s, and until German orthography was fixed, this was in the year 1901. So if German took 400 years, it would be stupid to think that Romani could be made the new standard language within 20 or 30 years. I think this is the most important, and there shouldn't, out of that, there shouldn't be this feeling of, oh my God, we are less worth because we don't have our standard languages. So this takes time, and if people decide to do so, or which I hope, of course, that Romani does not die out, but gets a better place and then gets better support and is used more, and then it's again spoken by the children, and this it's not forgotten. But yeah, this will take a lot of time, and you know, since we will also exist in the future, so why to have the stress anyway, you know? Yeah, I
think it's really, it needs time, yeah. But about future, what do you still wish to achieve?
What I still wish to achieve, yeah, what I have my contract until the end of next year, so I have still one article what we are currently writing. It's about what one project, what we also like one article what we also wrote together with Jaron and another colleague which is into Romani linguistics, Chiara Trebolato from Italy. Yeah, so we wrote about like the slow emergence of a new speech style, of a new pro.romani style in Italy. There we have some follow-up work, which is also dedicated to this topic on the one side, and on the other side, I'm still, you know, I do my little Slovenia, Austria project. We also actually plan to interview some Roma people from the region to also see this perspective of people who, as a mother tongue, have another language than German and Slovenian, and to do some more metalinguistic research. And after that,
we will see.
I will see. Exactly.
Yeah. Jakob, thank you very much for this interview, and we wish you a lot of success in your further work. And yeah, we are sure that you will do a lot of amazing things.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being with us and watching the interview. Subscribe to our channel, comment on the video, and see you next time in our new episode. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.